Why did L. Ron Hubbard start to do cinema films in the late 1970s in LaQuinta, California? We're going to find out why. Stay tuned right now. Aloha, everybody. My name is Mark Fisher, and welcome to our channel, Scientology Peeling the Onion, with my fabulous co-host, Janis Gillham Grady. How you doing, Janis?
G'day, everybody. Aloha, Mark. And look at this. We are color coordinated, where we have a guest who's in Hawaii, but he didn't get the memo.
On the color, but he still is in Hawaii.
But he's still in Hawaii, and I think he's still wearing a Hawaiian shirt. So we'll bring him on because of that.
Okay, great. Who we got here?
Who we got is Stu Moreau is back with us, and he's in Hawaii.
All right, here we go. Hey, Stuart, how you doing? Oh, wow, look at that rainbow over your head.
And I know why that's there. That's because LaQuinta used to be called Over the Rainbow, and we're going to talk about LaQuinta with Stu, right?
But that's not LaQuinta, though, is it, Stu?
No, this is Paia, Hawaii, and this is where my brother lives, and this is downtown. This is what it looks like out my window. No, I wish. I'm living in his basement. This is a projected backdrop, and we got a couple other fun ones. But yeah, it's beautiful over here, and having a great time. And I'll have to speak to wardrobe about the color coordination on the
please do that.
No, they should have known. Since we're doing the cine stuff, we got to have cine. By the way, is what we called golden era productions in the early days. The first executive directive that came out was Cine ED #1. Anyway, that was what we called it up until Golden Era Studios was the name, and then I guess it evolved into Golden Era Productions sometime later.
Yeah, it's funny. I didn't realize that, but that's true. I guess because cine is not really and nobody in Hollywood goes, "Oh, I work in cine." They work in cinema, right? Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, that's probably the usual Scientology shortened it or abbreviate it.
That's right. Janis, what was going on in the late 1970s that L. Ron Hubbard decided that he wanted to get involved in cinema and in movies?
Well, in July 1977, that's when the Guardian's office was raided by the FBI, and Hubbard took off to Sparks, Nevada, with Dee Dee, Claire, and Pat Broker, Claire Rousseau. And while he was there, he really had nothing to do. He wasn't on management lines. He wasn't on tech lines or anything like that. So he started writing a movie script, Revolt in the Stars, which is based on OT3. And he kind of thought, well, if I can get this out as a movie, maybe that'll help blow a lot of charge for people and be like a group Ingram release. So he did that. And then he thought, well, how can I better train people? Because he's always had a thing on trying to get trained auditors and auditors to really duplicate what he wants from them as auditors, with their TRs in and so forth. So that's when he decided he should write some movie scripts. And he wrote to us messengers. We were still at LaQuinta. And he wrote to us and had us get the 5 C's, the book 5 C's on cine. And we were all supposed to read those and get knowledgeable on how to do cinematography so that he could do the films with the messenger's help. And so when he came back in January 1978, we were supposed to already be trained on doing makeup and camera and lights and all that kind of stuff. So when he came back, he got into the regular routine of things and wanted to start going on cine, but he didn't realize how it would actually play out. And then he happened to be having a conversation with Stu Moreau. And that was then when cine was created. Right?
So
Right,
I'm going to
Stu?
just here's what happened, and this is sort of a culmination of the years. I've been in the Sea Org at that point for quite a while. I got all the training on the ship, and we learned eval tech and this and that. And I was the CO at the place, as we went over in the last LaQuinta interview.
CO means commanding officer. So you were the officer in charge of Winter headquarters in LaQuinta.
Yeah, which is comparable to a regular organization, the executive director of that.
Right.
And there was actually several. The CMO was there, and we were the estates, basically. We were taking care of the place. Let me just see if I can get the LaQuinta background up here, since we have it anyway. This is old LaQuinta.
There we go.
That's what it looked like back in the day.
That's probably the 60s. I got a 70s one too. They had put some anyway, that's what it looked like there. It was desert. We had the mountains in the background. We were behind the LaQuinta hotel there. And
yeah, we were on the back side of that photograph because those are the mountains that were behind us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So why don't you put up that well, anyway, that map where the orientation is. Okay, this was the layout of the properties we had in that part of LaQuinta. And okay, so that's the basic layout. On the top there was what they call palms, because there's a big palm, date palm field behind there. And then in the front where the yellow square is there on the top right was a bunch of housing. All these places had a lot of bedrooms, which was, I think, why they bought it, because Hubbard always had a lot of staff around it. And that was the idea. And then the next one down was the Olives, the sort of the bigger place there was the big house, and then there was a guest house on the left with 4 rooms. Anyway, between and then we also had more dates and a corral behind the house there. And then if you keep going, that next big green patch was an alfalfa field. And then right at the bottom of the screen there is the where the rifle house was, where LRH lived. And so when he and I was the CO when he came, the commanding officer of the place when he came back. But we had been on LRH and I were pretty close, as far as talking to each other from before, because we had done a lot of projects together before he left for the FBI raid. He was there for several months anyway, and we had started the auditing project and things like that. And I was, can you put that other screen back? I just want to show you where I met him. On the, we were walking. He was taking a walk with a couple messengers right between that big property and that lower one where it said where I said was the alfalfa field.
Stu, you gotta describe it a little more. When you say the big property, I mean, which square? I mean, where are we talking about?
Well, that would be the middle square in that, where the green is on the left. That was the Olives place. It had date trees and it had some citrus back there, and it was a big corral in back where we used to have a couple of horses. And then the next property down was 5 acres. Those are big properties. That next one down is 5 acres of alfalfa that was growing there. We had other.
Are you talking about, when you say the next one down, are you talking about the bottom green square?
Yeah,
Yes,
you can probably zoom in. I think I had a close-up of that before anyway.
It's to the right of the pink, which was a big slab of cement.
There you go.
There you go.
So right on the bottom of that 5 acres of alfalfa, there was a road there, and LRH could go for a walk once in a while. And I just happened to bump into him over there. And I had been thinking about the films for a while. Like Jan said, we had been doing actor training. I think it was Janis, is that the name of the person, the system we were following? But anyway, we were all doing actor training, and I don't remember the other parts, but I remember the actor training. But anyway, I bumped into LRH there, and I just, we were talking. And by the way, people earlier had asked, in reacting to meeting LRH, there was a flag order called Flag Order 38, which was etiquette. And I just wanted to mention that. It laid out how to talk to any senior officer. You just say good afternoon, good morning, or whatever it is. So it's pretty straightforward. You didn't have to worry about anything because it was all laid out in a system of how to interact. We were always in close quarters, and Flag Order 38 was how to basically rub elbows better and how to be courteous and things like that. But it was always, good morning, sir, good afternoon, sir. So we met, and then I just said, I asked him, I said, what's going on with the film project? Are we going to be shooting those films pretty soon? And he said, there's some problems associated with it. We don't have personnel. We don't have a studio. And when he mentioned studio, now, see, I'm very good with spaces and building and fixing things. And we had number 2 there was what we call the date packing plant, or alternately the milking shed, because I guess they had cows around there for a time too. But it was basically just a big cinder block building that was empty. It hadn't been renovated at all. It had a little linoleum on the floor. It had that walk-in reefer on the bottom end of it, which is where we had built a sound studio I had mentioned earlier. And I interacted a lot with LRH in that sound studio because I had to be there all the time. But anyway, so I asked him about that, and I said, hey, can we use that date packing plant as a studio? I said I could convert it in my spare time. I'm so optimistic about these kind of things, like I had a lot of spare time. But he lit up. He said, oh, that's a good idea. And then we went back and forth, and he mentioned some stuff he had wanted to do all the way back in St. Hill. He had been thinking about doing filming with auditors. He had a special platform he wanted to have where he could just rotate it and have 2 fixed cameras, so he didn't have to move cameras around, just move the platform around. So that was one of the specs he wanted in there, sort of a shooting booth that was like a sound booth that was quiet for auditing, and then the rest of it was probably, let's say, 30 feet by 30 feet. It wasn't all that big, as a studio, but it was a start. It was a place. And I'm not a studio guy. I don't know about movies or any of that kind of stuff. But I asked him, and we went with the flow there, and I worked on that and renovated it in the evenings because I still had my regular job to do and stuff. And I got a little help on it, and we had built, soundproofed it, built that, put all the electric in, so all the lighting takes a lot of electricity, and we built a big shed for makeup and props and costumes. We put a bathroom because there was no bathroom there. And as I mentioned in the previous one, that other big shed next to it was just a bunch of stuff LRH had been hauling around since the 50s, I guess. And
Stu, let me ask you a couple of questions. When you had a project like, oh, let's turn the date packing plant into a studio, or let's build a bunkhouse or whatever, how did you get your money, and how did that all work? Was there like no problem getting anything like that done? I mean, like how did that work?
This was a thing where LRH, I don't remember exactly. We just put in for it probably. It was probably directly with LRH on all that because I was working real closely with him. He would check on how it's going. He would send specs. We'd have messenger runs about this and that. He'd come check up on the progress and stuff. And that was the easy part, the money. I was going to mention that when he gets hot on a project like this, it becomes kind of all-consuming. And this was just the early stages of it. There was a similar project he got really hot on, which was the troop on the ship. And if I can do a quick aside and tell you how that started, it would just take a minute.
No, that's okay. Let's keep it on here. Let's keep it on the cine.
Okay. All right, we can go over that later. But anyway, he was just hot on it, so there's no problem with money. Just CSWs and stuff like that.
Well, let me ask Janis. Janis, do you recall? Like, I mean, I agree with you, Stu, that when he was hot on a project, it became the top priority, right, Janis? I mean, I would have thought that there would have been missions sent out to oversee the project and get it all done and all that. Is that how that worked, or was it much looser there at LaQuinta?
No, it's much looser. I mean, we ran projects. The messengers ran different projects, and the Treasury aide back in Clearwater would have been told to get the money from Sea Org reserves and send it over for the creation of Cine, so that, and Hubbard would order a camera from St. Hill and have Irene Throp, his secretary, get it. And she would go to Sea Org Reserves and get the money from there. And that's how the different projects would work.
So it just would appear because he asked, he needed the money and you guys were able to just get the money. The people providing the money, like in Florida, they had no idea what the money was for. The money
right. And you got to remember at this time at SU, Special Unit, or Winter Headquarters, WHQ in LaQuinta, there was, all it was there for at that time was as an estate service to Hubbard. And though we were working on getting new auditors in and getting the auditors trained by Hubbard directly, they had no actual income of their own. So SOR, Sea Org Reserves, was supporting this organization that was supporting Hubbard. And Hubbard had his own income, but he also lived on SOR. And so that's how that worked. So when he needed money, that just automatically came, just like when he was in Sparks, Nevada, he needed $75,000. So he'd feel that if he was cut off, you know, he had some money to survive on. So, and that's a whole story in itself that we've already told.
Yeah.
But, and it was only later, once Cine got fully set up and production line set up, did it become its own self-sufficient operation and made its own money. But before that, it just lived off Sea Org Reserves.
I see. So let me ask you another question. Okay. So you had money was not really a problem. How about personnel to build these things?
Well, no, that was a problem. That was a problem because we were pretty well established. Everybody had jobs to do and we had schedules and stuff and we studied. It wasn't hectic at all. This place was a very nice place to work for a Sea Org post. I used to love coming down, you know, get that really nice feeling. I really liked living in that area. It's very nice. But no, it was one of those things where I just said I would do it in my spare time. So I just put my evenings in on it. And if somebody came in, we got a new person in the org who was kind of available. You know, I had a couple of people help me, but that was it. And we would just do step by step. And it wasn't a thing that he was all flat out at that point. It was just we were kind of blooping along. And then, I don't know, whatever it was, a month or two later, it was done. It wasn't a very extensive project. The building was already there. We had to soundproof it and put electric in there and probably the regular, I think Mark Ferrer did most of the electrical in there. And
you have a picture of Mark Ferreira, Mark?
Yeah, I'm gonna pull it up right now.
That was.
Well, hold on. Go ahead. That's Mark Ferrara.
Yeah.
Otherwise known as Muff.
Yeah.
Yes.
The setting up and the construction, that was the sort of the easy part for me because it was just, and I didn't have any plans past that, except for, I think at that point I was chief officer because, and this is sort of like where my 15 minutes of fame really comes in for the whole Scientology career. You know, because like I said, I learned eval tech and stuff. So I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, okay, we got it all set up. Everything was done to the specs LRH1, and he's been out there and inspected and all that. You know, he knew what was going on. So we're not making film still. And so I say, okay. And I did an eval, and the situation was the films weren't being produced, and the why was that the org wasn't organized for production, you know, all the data and stuff. And I had a few people, I've been surreptitiously asking a few people, maybe they were double posted, you know, would you like to work in Cine? And everybody wanted to work in the Cine project. It didn't matter, but I had a few people that we could have considered spare. And so on my program, on the handling program, I had posted a few people here and there to start in prompts. And, you know, it's like the small thinking kind of thing, you know, we just ease into it. Well, Wayne Marple was the CO at that time, and I was the chief officer. So I gave him the eval. I said, look, this is what we should do. And he just looked at it and said, oh, we're not going to do it. And I said, okay, but I had attached a copy of it to my DR, one of the, you know, famous DR things, because he was reading all the DRs. And so
much you're talking about Hubbard. Hubbard got the daily reports.
Daily reports. Yeah, he liked to keep track of what's going on in his local environment, and he would read those daily reports. So this was mentioned early on in our interview. So Doreen comes running by me, I don't know, maybe 10 o'clock at night. And he basically said,
Doreen is a messenger.
yeah, she was one of the messengers for years and years. And she came screaming by. She goes, boy, you really stirred things up with this one, Stu. And so I didn't know what she was talking about. But the next morning comes out this Cine ED1, and everybody at that base, we had students, we had CMO, we had all the estates guys. Everybody was now double hatted. We had a regular job and we had a Cine hat. And it didn't matter. We had to do it. It's like, I guess we get stuck on producer.
Let me explain just to our viewers. Hat in Scientology, the term hat is your job. What's your hat? In other words, I'm the producer, or I'm the director, or whatever. That we would refer to it as that's your hat. And so if you're double hatted, that means you have two jobs, just so people understand that.
That is a Scientology term that's been around for many, many, many years, but you see it in society a lot now these days. I think it's crept from Scientology to society because it's one of those things that kind of makes sense. Hubbard always said it was like, you know, a railroad engineer wears a different hat from the caboose guy in Cincinnati. He said that's what it's from, but you didn't hear that in society like 30 years ago. But now you'll often hear people say, "Oh, I put on my police officer hat and took care of this." You know, it's one of those.
Well,
things.
Well, nowadays people say I'm at my second or third job, or they say I'm over at my side hustle.
Yeah, that. But they also you hear hat a lot more in the society.
Yeah,
too.
you do.
I noticed
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So we were, and I wasn't put in charge of it. Now I'm not, you know, the serious make it go right. It was me because I had the idea and I pushed it, but I didn't especially want to be in charge of it. I figured it was just going to be something that we did inside the org. But this is Hubbard and the way he thinks. That's big thinking as opposed to small thinking. He just said, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to do it, you know? And we just jumped right in, and all of a sudden everybody's making props and sets, and you know, the sound guys are getting ready. David Miskovich was an auxiliary camera guy. Yes, sir.
I was going to ask. So Janis and also Stu. So did you have people there at LaQuinta who had experience at all in the movies or in sound? Or in sound?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously you had people who recorded his lectures and mixed and that type of thing.
We had
so
sound
you didn't
people,
really
yeah.
have, yeah, but you didn't have people like, I was going to ask, like, how was it just sort of LRH was going to do things and treat everybody was going to learn on the job?
Let me explain that. I don't think at the beginning we had any professional movie making people. It was just the crew, and we were going to do it. And you know, people, I know you had that director on, and he was kind of rolling his eyes about how the quality of the early stuff. But there's some good things for Scientology that came out of that. Number one, Hubbard worked closely with people again and getting things on film the way he wanted it to be. And that was good for overall for the whole legacy of Scientology. But okay, this is the way he wanted. I know there's some controversy about floating needles now or something. It should all be on film there from when he directed it. That's the way, if anybody has any questions. And I think they redid, well, of course, those films are just full of us people that are not especially their favorite people anymore. So they had to change a lot of them just for that, I think, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Anyway, that was.
Well, also the quality wasn't great, but yeah, there were a lot of people no longer around. But
yeah.
you know,
Janis,
to answer
Janis, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Janis.
Mark, to answer your question about that, we did not have experienced crew, and it was people with just reading the 5 C's. But then I was on a project to get auditors in, and then I had a project to get a LRH chef. And then the next thing you know, I have orders to find a gaffer. We need someone who knows lighting. And I actually did find someone who happened to have worked in the porn industry. I couldn't find anyone else.
Well, he had done more than the porn industry. I know what you're talking about. That was a general thing where you got a few people. We had John Longenecker up there. He actually won an Oscar for
Yeah, we
in the
did get
amateur
connector.
film category, but he was an Oscar-winning director, and he came up, and we had the. I thought it was more than one lighting guy. I thought we had a couple.
Well, Pat Murray, I then got us Pat Murray.
Yeah.
He
And
came
some
up
of
with
those
his
guys
wife,
were on-
Melanie.
They were on temporary contracts. They weren't regular Sea Org, those people. But they did. He did bring some people in just to work on.
Well, that was after my time. I got Pat Murray up there, and I got the porn gaffer up there. But
Well, I was going to ask Janis. So Janis, you were involved with getting a lot of the personnel up there because you were getting
Yes.
auditors up there for training.
Yeah, I was getting the auditors. So then it was me getting all the people up there. But then when I ended up going to the RPF, then suddenly someone else had to do it. And that's when they went to the short-term people to get them up there rather than Sea Org members.
I see. Now, how did the messengers get on the shoot crew? Because this is a famous picture of LRH, and it's a posed photograph, right?
What I told you was everybody at the base, LRH's, his household staff, everybody at the base had two hats now. That's just the way it was. You had the cine hat. So that basically meant I was in charge of all them people, with all the coordinating, all the different things that had to get done. And it was a bit much for me, believe me, because I hadn't planned on it growing that fast. And I don't know how long it was, but I sent you that comment there. I eventually got busted off of there. And no, I had already built the second studio by that time. I think I was doing that was part of my.
Yeah, the comment was after the second studio was done at Silver.
Because I got exonerated on that comment just from all my quote unquote contributions to the whole thing.
Yeah, we'll cover the comment later. But yeah, so like my sister Terry and Doreen had been part of the messenger camera crew when LRH was doing still photos back on the ship. So Terry naturally became the cameraman and had to learn how to do a motion camera rather than a still camera. And Miss Gavage was put on as an assistant for her. And then like the messengers on duty were like the script girl. And any changes he wanted to the script, the messengers would write it out. And actually, here's a story that happened. One or two of the messengers screwed up on making some notes on one of the scripts we were doing. And Stu, you might remember this. We had, I think he was the only black crew member there, and Hubbard had him trying to learn an English accent for the film that we were doing that was a quote unquote being done in Africa. And everybody had long hours going with the double hatting and messenger duties. And like me, I had to do watches. I had to bring in all the different recruits and work on personnel. I had to be an actor on the set. And I also had to help with makeup. So it became totally insane.
How could you sleep?
You didn't get any sleep. You just didn't. And Hubbard got so upset with the two messengers that messed up on the script. Every messenger was now penalized. And he rewrote the script to write the messengers into the film as pickaninnies. So Dee Dee and even Laurel Watson, who wasn't even a messenger, she was his PR, public relations, all had to be done up as pickaninnies peeping through a window. And then I was made the laundry lady, so they did me up all blackface with cotton wool up my nose to spread it out. And they had this big yellow hoop dress type of thing on me, and I had a big thing of yellow all bundled on my head. And so now we're doing like 2-3 jobs and then acting, and that was supposed to be a penalty for someone screwing up on the script.
Listen, Janis, I want to apologize for that because all that is my fault. If I hadn't written that CSW or originated that, we had the most nicest the environment that, if you remember, even when LRH was gone, it was so calm. We just had jobs, we had study, we had the swimming pools, we had, a nightclub in Palm Springs to go to. It was the nicest assignment you could possibly get in the CR. And then
it was.
And then Stu has to do this eval to get the whole thing going.
And
that's
thank you for realizing that.
Yeah. No, I realized that a long time ago. I just apologizing to you now, personally. But that's basically.
I hadn't realized it was you, but yes, you're the one who changed that peaceful environment. You know, we had the siestas every day. Instead of sleeping, we would all go hang out at the pool and have fun. And
I heard about your nights at the disco too, right? You guys would go into Palm Springs and go dancing.
We'd go to Zelda's in Palm Springs and Geronimo's in Palm Desert.
One of the first sets we submitted was me and Leo Johnson, who was a carpenter guy, and he was in charge of set because he was a carpenter, and I was in charge of him because I was the producer. What do I know about sets? So I think we were drawing up with the crayon, and so Elrich would get this stuff. And he called me over there, and he's trying to explain the color wheel to me, okay? And I'm not an artist type, right? And he's telling me, he's got this poster, Clint Eastwood, says, see all those red, blacks, and this and that. I'm going, yeah. It's like, anyway. It's just
he was big on the color wheel.
No, it's funny you mentioned that because we all remember the color wheel because it came up in all designs, literally all the interior designs of any space. There had to be the color wheel with it because the different colors that were chosen had different depths and warm and cold and all that. And it was a big deal in Scientology.
That was just another thing he knew just by being so smart. That's something a little foreign to me, And it was
and also he was a still photographer too, Janis, right? I mean, he had to learn all this bunch of that with his photography because he was a good still photographer. I mean, he had some of the finest equipment in the world as a photographer.
Technically, he was an expert on all that stuff, and I think he took a lot of good pictures too. So that was an interesting little aside there on.
Well, let me ask you this, okay? Because the other thing too I wanted to mention about this, okay, like everybody was running around double-hatted, and you actually shot films. I mean, you got quite a few films and different things shot before LRH had to, leave the property and never to be seen again. But Janis, one of the things I was going to mention is that he was hard to deal with. I mean, he had a hard time dealing with the crew on the set too, and a lot of different handlings that he created were because of his dealings with the staff on the movie set, right? Like, tell that story, or tell some of the things that came out of that, because I know, but go ahead.
Well, can I just mention
like superpower, the WOOC, World Out of Calm, which later became Key to Life and Life Orientation. This was because he felt he couldn't deal with the staff. They were what were they, too stupid to learn, or what was the deal on that, Janis?
Well, they weren't educated. The education system has gone downhill, but I mean, I was a sixth grade education was the last grade I ever finished. And he never complained about my education. So that was never an excuse for anything. But yes, you're right. This is where he came up with, first, before he got into the cine, was dealing with Ron Clifford, Stu. Ron Clifford was in charge of Winter Headquarters, and Gary Weesey was there, and the two of them, LRH, thought they were ex-drug cases, and they had unhandled drugs, and both had taken LSD. So that's when Hubbard got onto the Sweat Out program, which then turned into the Purification. And he had Ron and Gary running around LaQuinta in rubber suits, sweating it out. And then he had Jim Din doing study into different vitamins that they should take. And so that's how the Purification came about. But then he got into the World Out of Calm because people didn't understand basic words, which you should have learned all that on the primary rundown, where you had to look up every single word on the study tapes. But now he's trying to take that even further back and then he decides, a lot of people are potential trouble sources with PTS situations. So that's when they had to do clay demos for the clay table auditing, to play demo their PTS situation to try and blow the charge on that. And meanwhile, he had the auditors he was trying to train, and then he realized, well, they don't have their TRs in, so then he's now also got students at Flag on the other side of the U.S. doing TRs course and submitting tapes up to him of their TRs. Right. And what else do we have?
Well, no, and then I was going to mention on the Ron Clifford and Gary Weesey, that's also when the nobody could come in the Sea Org if they were an LSD case came out in 77, 78, around that time period.
Yeah, right? That's correct. Yeah.
There was
and then he was filming TR 0 to 4 with Dan Kuhn and Robert Waldman, as Joe, and I've forgotten what Waldo's name was, but that was to teach auditors how to do TRs properly.
Yeah, this is communication. TR 0 to 4 is communication course stuff. Yeah.
Right, and Stuart already built the studio by now, so LRH's motorhome would come down and be parked right there outside of the studio, so that when he wanted to take a break or have lunch, he could just walk from the studio right over into his motorhome. And he'd often have Dan Kuhn and Waldo come into the motorhome, and they would discuss the next scene and so forth, and messengers would be in and out, and and they'd all sit around joking or telling stories or working out the next scene. And this is all in between, him being very personable with the actors, because he wouldn't want to interbulate the actors, but then he'd get on the set and he would just be explosive to all the crew who aren't even sleeping, but, and they're trying to do their best, and they've also got the pressures of their other jobs. And so the crew would treat it very different to how if you were acting.
Right. Right. And just so we know, the people in this shot here, David Miscavige eventually became the cameraman, and that's him in the center with the long brown hair at the camera, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and he actually is blonde hair.
We had a they had the high 8 videos. I mean, the videos had come out in the small cassette form at that time. And one of the steps for the studio setup was to have, so we could have instant replays. That was the backup. Right. The filming was done in 16 millimeter, and that's probably in the background. But that camera he's on is a high end JVC video recorder. And then we would play them back, and we had a whole card set up for playbacks and stuff like that. And he and Mark
Yeager.
Yeah, they were that camera. They weren't the 16 the film cameraman. They were the video camera.
Terry, my sister Terry was on the 16 millimeter camera until Big Cine Comev, where she and Jerry got busted to the RPF, and I was already on the RPF at this point, and it's like, oh, here comes my sister to join me. But she was on, I got reprieved, and then they were shorter messengers, but anyway, I got reprieved, and then Stu.
A little more on that TR stuff. One of the big deals that came out of this Cine project early on there was, like you said, with Dan Kuhn and them, he was coaching them in the motorhome on the next shot. And he asked Dan why he's just using, basically we used to have 5 acknowledgments, good, fine, okay, all right, and thank you. He said, what are you doing that for? And they said, well, that's what it's in the bulletin that way. He said, that's not how you acknowledge it. So the whole TR2 was revised because of that.
That's right.
That's a good point.
Yeah. There was Dan, by the way, somebody had to be, he was the lead guy in the first movie we had. And he had been lobbying me on the side. And I had a meeting with LRH about who we were going to make the star or the lead in that first movie. And I said, Dan was who I wanted, but I was a little worried because he had one eye was what we call a lazy eye. And I brought that up to LRH. He goes, oh, that won't show up in the shot. I said, okay. So that's how he actually got the part. We were discussing that. And I said, yeah, well, he'd be good. Because he was good looking, personable, and plus whatever level auditor. He had been my auditor there prior to the FBI raids when LRH was doing the training of them. and LRH was the CS at the base. And I actually got kicked off auditing because all I did was FN. It was so easy what I was doing. My last CS from LRH, which I ever had, because I never got an auditing after that really, was off auditing until he keys in again. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah. Well,
But
Dan
anyway.
was my auditor
Yeah.
trying to audit me on, I think, on the loss of my mother anyway, when apparently I had an IRS on Mary Sue. And that's when I ended up going to the RPF. But
Oh,
I
I see
don't
that.
blame Dan for it, because that's when they found out, after everyone kept going to the RPF, they found out there was something off with the toner, the knob.
If you make
Yeah,
it too
it's funny.
sensitive, a dirty needle looks like an RS. That's what
Yeah.
It's funny. It's funny. I just want to mention for our viewers and our never ends who have never been in Scientology, I and Janis and Stu, we were guinea pigs on many new discoveries by L. Ron Hubbard. I mean, I can remember going in the sauna for the first time, being on the sauna, the Purification pilot, you know what I mean? Or like you said, the RS, and then they find out the meter's wrong. So Janis ended up in the RPF when she shouldn't have been. And, there was a lot of instances of that going on.
Now,
Yeah.
I have another little personal thing with Hubbard. That's a little aside here also. I'm wondering if I might have influenced that whole exercise sweat out stuff myself, because he had an exercise bike. He'd be in the courtyard, and I was talking to him over there, and he was pedaling away on his bike over there. And we got to talking about, I just mentioned to him that I had read a Scientific American article years and years before, where this fellow went all the way around the world and found all these people that were over 100, and what their secrets were and what the common denominator was for them. And the only thing he found as a common denominator was exercise. He says they lived on the side of steep mountains. One of the guys was a grape stomper. I think he mentioned grape stomping. His feet were like platters. He had been stomping grapes for so many years, and they were stained permanently purple. He had interviewed that guy, and I told LRH that whole story. He goes, "Oh yeah, okay." But that was way before that Purification stuff came out, and I'm wondering if it sort of clued them into the whole exercise importance and stuff. That, by the way, as another aside, is one of the biggest keys to healthy aging is keeping on moving, keeping the exercise going, especially with weight stuff.
And then the other thing that came out of this time period at W with Cine and the crew there and all that was superpower, which now is being delivered to public and in Clearwater, spending thousands of dollars, doing these things that LRH developed or was developing in order to handle the staff so that they could do their jobs better. Am I right, Janis?
Yeah. But what happened with that is some of it was like revitalizing purposes. And
Right.
so there's staff members who get purposes revitalized of, oh, I wanted to be a musician. Well, and then the next thing you know, they're petitioning to leave the Sea Org and go back to Celebrity Center as a public to be a musician or an artist, but their purpose was not the Sea Org purpose as an individual. And so then it was kind of, this was a mistake. And so then it was changed towards the public rather than the staff.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that too, Janis, because I heard that that's why Miscavige canceled that you can't do Key to Life or the life orientation course anymore. I heard this story because a lot of the public were doing their life orientation and determining their purpose didn't have anything to do with Scientology.
I'm wondering how that fits in, because Dan Kuhn, who was on the first set, and I read his website recently, and he had a blog about those days, and he said that he was actually really scared about acting. He had all these somatics and things, feelings and stuff about it, and he got audited on it, and he said it completely cleared it up. I think it was Dianetic auditing, as a matter of fact. He said it completely cleared it up, and he just had absolutely no worries about acting, and it was really easy and good for him, So that's an interesting tie-in to all that. I wasn't much of an actor myself. Oh, I was going to say,
I was going to ask you, were you in any of the movies? Were you in any
of a bunch, but I wasn't that good at acting. But an interesting thing is you were bothered by the Rant and Raven that LRH did on the set, and to me, it didn't bother me at all. Not much, you know. Of course, I was not affected that stuff. Like I said, I was pretty flat on everything. But the first set we did, which was a classroom set, and he came in there. He had his motorhome outside. He came in there. And he had the bullhorn, and it was packed. It was like a really kind of a. And we all had to be real quiet, of course, because we're recording all that. And he ran it through a few times, lights, camera, action, and they did the whole thing. And then I guess he got tired of it and said, "Okay, here, Stu, you direct this." And he just walked out and went to the motorhome. And I'm thinking, great. Anyway, so I was actually the first director too, but I mean, the deputy director, I suppose. But that didn't last long because was not my forte. I was very good at fixing things and building things and somewhat at organizing and this and that. And that's what I kind of fell into. We ended up, that studio we quickly outgrew. The whole thing just grew really fast. I mean, once we got involved and we started getting a lot of people, the Starkey showed up, Bill Robertson showed up. I think I was back on a CO by the time Bill Robertson showed up. And and Cine was kind of course, part of the whole thing at that time. And I actually wrote LRH and said that he should, I said, because I knew Bill pretty good from the ship, and I'd been his chief officer on the ship. And this was all moving. I wanted the best thing to happen, and I knew Bill was a lot better at organizing these kind of things than I was. And so I told LRH in the report, I said, you should put Bill on as CO and me on as chief officer, so that happened. And it just grew really, really fast. And we rapidly ran out of space to shoot. And then I was talking to LRH, and he said, we had another property down the road a little bit. Can we get into that now? Is that okay?
We can Silver.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he told me he wanted a bigger studio, and the spec was big and big enough. The doors had to be big enough to drive a semi in. That was like one of the few specs. And we wanted more soundproof because we were having sound problems. We've always been plagued with sound problems because, oh, look, there's your granddaughter. Okay, so this was the layout. Do you want to put that earlier one that shows the relationship of all this to LA?
Yeah, sure.
This to show everybody where all this, so it's not all that mysterious where all this stuff was taking place. Okay, so LA would be over on the left there. The first little square, that's where the Gillham Hot Springs is now. That's up in the mountains in Hemet, California.
That's the red square.
Just past San Bernardino and that. And then if you keep going, that's I-10 out of LA. And then if you keep going a little bit more on I-10, there's a branch coming off called I-111. And that goes down through Palm Springs in the Coachella Valley. And so that first square is the oblong square is rectangle is Palm Springs, and then the lower one is where LaQuinta is. So then
right. So on the left is where Gillham Hot Springs was, where gold, but that didn't exist when you guys first were out there. And then up above that rectangle is Palm Springs, and then a little bit southeast is that's LaQuinta.
Right. So that's further down. Palm Springs is kind of like the top of the Coachella Valley, which, by the way, that whole valley is like, I think the lowest part, the Salton Sea, which everybody knows about from the festival.
Yeah.
It's like 200 feet below sea level or something like that. It's really where we were in LaQuinta. You could just go to the side where the mountain started, and you would find a water line with shells and things like that. So it wasn't that many, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of years ago that it was underwater, that whole place here. You follow it down, it connects up to the Gulf of Mexico, and there's kind of a mountain range there. But one of these days, I guess they're going to have a big earthquake, and it'll probably be all. And the San Andreas Fault runs all along the eastern side of that Coachella Valley. Okay, so on the left, we had Palms, Olives, Rifle. Rifle, by the way, was the name of the prior owner. That's how it stuck with that name.
Yeah, and I'm glad you told me that. You told me that the other day. I never knew that. I always assumed it was just a code name for Hubbard, but that was interesting. That was the name of the prior owner.
Yeah.
Right. Well, Palms was Palms because of all the palm trees around. And then Olives, yes, they had palm fields as well. But within the property where the houses, where the buildings were, there were olive trees. And so it was called Olives.
Yeah, I don't know if LRH made up those nicknames or not, but I don't know. Rifle just stuck. I think the olives and palms and the alfalfa field were bought first, and I think Rifle might have been bought after. I don't know, but that
Duke Snyder of the Guardian's office was working on finding these locations.
it was basically a whole block of.
Yeah.
You know, it was a nice area. That street we were near or on was called Eisenhower, and I think he used to have a mansion for his winter place down the road too. I think that's why it was. But anyway, so then the next place was a few miles away called Silver Sands Ranch. That was bought as 48 for. We had housing problems or what we call birthing. It's funny. Somebody was wondering what birthing was because you have birthing as having a kid, and it's like, oh no, that's like on the ship you call it a birth, and so we always called it birthing. And we needed a place for people to sleep. So another big estate was bought, which was 40 acres of grapefruit, and it had a big house with a pool, and there was a trailer there, and a tennis court also, and then the rest of it was grapefruit and a few other kind of citrus trees. And then soon after that, and this was also early on in the whole operation, they bought that other place, which we called Moreau, because it was on Monroe Street. And that was probably 20 acres. It was another big place that had dates and citrus, and it had, I think, 3 houses that some doctors had owned. That's the whole story of getting rid of the trash that was living in there, the people that were.
Oh,
that was a whole big story. I had a gun pulled on me and stuff. But anyway, that's
the
what we built.
had to clean out Monroe, and there was a pathway through the house to get to the back to the bedrooms, and it was just trash.
Yeah,
I mean, you had to shovel the trash out. It was so bad.
And they let the cats go to the bathroom in the house and all kind of stuff. It was really bad, but of course we cleaned it all up. There's some real funny stories to tell if you want another minute or two here.
But they had also the very back room off the kitchen was where they kept one of their children, and there was peepholes into that room from the kitchen and from the hallway. I wouldn't be a bit surprised. It was terrible.
They had the obligatory, cars with like old Cadillacs with the hoods up, and the school bus with the hood up, and things like that. It was an interesting group of people. And
so, what did you buy them for?
Huh?
What were they bought for?
Clothing.
What were they bought for?
Clothing.
More birthing. There was 3 houses there. Plus, part of the plan of having those students come is we needed more housing for them, because how many students did you recruit, Jan? Was it about 15 or something like that, or 10? It was quite a few, right?
Of the auditors, I had probably about 20.
Okay, so we needed more space, and so we built another big bunkhouse at that place, from the ground up, and that was one of the projects that I ran, and actually the students were working on it. Like one of their jobs was to build that place where they were going to live. And we had a school bus that ran between the properties. And this was all prior to LRH leaving and prior to the filming. But then what happened is during the filming, after I kind of moved to the side from being a producer, I don't know, I think I might have still been producer, because that was before I got busted. And he wanted another studio, a bigger one, and that's so I designed from scratch a 48 by 64 open building, 16 foot high. And he just said, "Yeah, design a building like this." And I'm designing a building. Well, this is architecture. You got stuff with weights, and so I had to break out architecture books. I was 25 or 26 or something like that, or maybe 27, and I just broke out the books and I figured all the calculations out, and 48-foot trusses and all that, and we built the thing actually very inexpensively. That was one of the things that DM got I think we only spent $50,000 building that building. And the next studio that Bill Robertson designed solved all the problems that we had with the first two. Sound was a big problem. One of the big mistakes I made in the whole thing is I never was exposed to Hollywood. And I should have gone there before we started and seen how they did it there. Because I was more or less just relying on what LRH wanted. You know, he said this and this and this, so I would do that. But I should have done on my own more research, because later on I did and found out, especially with the sound, how to I was pretty good on soundproofing by that point, but the sound, the reverberation and things like that, to make a sound studio, what you need. And then, anyway, the fixing that caused some problems, but the whole thing grew so fast, and then the Gillham Hot Springs came up, and then we did a lot of shooting at that studio, which was built on the tennis court I had mentioned. And
yeah, but you're talking about Silver. So what did you build? That's where you built the big studio there at Silver?
Yeah.
Got it.
And then
Yeah.
I'm amazed. I have to say this, Stu. I'm amazed. We talked about this the other day. How fast you were able to get building permits and build the stuff and get it up from the ground up. Because I mean, literally, you guys were in LaQuinta. What, from Janis, from 77 to 1980, like 3 years, right?
The end of 76. The end of 76 until the end of 79, we were in LaQuinta. 78. The end of 78.
No, I'm just saying
is
that's really fast. That's
yeah,
really
because
fast
I'll tell you
you're doing yourself.
I'll tell you why we ended up
in LaQuinta in 76. Anyway, July 77 there was a raid. LRH was gone until January 78. And
right.
We were up in Gillham by
December 78.
December 78. Well, yeah, that's when Gillham started.
No, 78.
I don't think we moved up there till 79.
No,
that's right.
But anyway, so yeah, you're right. We didn't have a lot of time, but the thing grew so fast anyway. Yes.
Yes. I was before I went to the RPF, I had on my personnel lines, we needed someone for costumes. I found a lady who did costumes in Las Vegas, Adele Hartwell, and her husband Ernie. And they had a dance routine they used to do together, and she also did costumes. Anyway, so they come up just as I've gone to the RPF, and she does costumes, and she had a problem with the way LRH used to yell and scream on the set.
Yeah.
And she's like, I can't. He did.
I know he did. Yeah, he intimidated people. Yeah. And,
yeah.
But it's just the way he was.
The more he did on Cine, the more irritated he got. And when he'd wake up in the morning, it was like, oh, please make this a good day. And then, wake up in a good mood, and he wouldn't. And it became very miserable having to deal with him. And then he'd go down as Cine, and it was very intimidating. Anyway, Adele knew how to operate properly. She worked in the casinos with the shows, and nobody yelled and screamed. They treated each other with respect. Anyway, she got fed up with it, and she and Ernie blew and got the hell out of Dodge. And their daughter, Vidorn, was a messenger, and she was married to John Alesso. Anyway, I was in the RPF when they blew. When I got off the RPF, I did some messenger watches. Then I was sent off to Clearwater to do a personnel exec resources project. And while I was there, she and Ernie had gone to reporters and said exactly where LaQuinta was and where Hubbard was. And so then the next thing you know is there's reporters now snooping around. And just at that time, we had been shooting over at Massacre Canyon in Golf Course in San Jacinto.
Gillham Hot Springs.
Gillham Hot Springs. Right. We'd done a whole movie there on golfing.
Right.
And so we were familiar with this property. And Kimma knew the owner of the disco we used to go to, Geronimo's, who was also a real estate agent and an attorney. And so he went to bankruptcy court for us and bought us MCI, Massacre Canyon Inn. Wow. And so that was going to be our summer headquarters. We had winter headquarters. So when it gets really hot, we go to LaQuinta. When it got really cold.
I never understood that because they were both hot. They were both really, really hot. So it made no sense.
But one was hotter than the other. So anyway, so that's how we ended up buying what's now Golden Era Studios or
And
International
became
Base.
the international management and all that.
Yes, because, and it just so happened that we'd already purchased it when Adele and Ernie sent the reporter to LaQuinta and blew the cover on that. And so quickly everybody moves over to Hemet because we now had that property, and it was like quickly get it set up, build a gym, and it got into that. And then Hubbard went to X in Hemet, which was an apartment building, because Bonneview wasn't set up yet. Anyway, so that's a whole nother thing, but that's what blew WHQ, that we could no longer go back there or be there. Yes.
You know what I've learned today? You know what I've learned today? Stuart is responsible for the fact that Cine, you know, that everybody had to double hat and work. And Janis is responsible for the Harwells being at W and blowing the cover for Hubbard.
But you know, it's like, it was sort of like.
And you are forgiven, just so you know, you're forgiven, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, it's yeah. But the timing was serendipitous too. The big place came up, and we were way crowded in that little place there, and it was just too small, and it wasn't professional. The next studio was that one Robertson designed, and I saw the plans for that and all that, because I was still somewhere in the executive level when we did the move. But yeah, it was very with a lot of esoteric materials, because he couldn't use anything with dust and things like that. So I think Bill did a pretty good job on that studio.
Yeah,
worked out
we'll
pretty good
cover that
guys,
another.
right?
Yeah, another one. Yeah, another video.
We can cover that in another video. I got photos of the building of that gym.
Yeah, we've actually shown it before. But hey, listen, I think we're at a good point here where we can end this, because we've got more stories to tell about it, including Janis. I just realized we need to tell the story about when Ella Rach almost died when he was at LaQuinta, and David Mayo had to come out there and basically help save his life, right? I mean, so we haven't even told any of those stories yet, but we're going to have you back. And then, of course, we'll continue with the Cine stuff and how, you know, Cine continued over at Massacre Canyon Inn in Gillman Hot Springs.
That's a nice background, Stu.
There, huh?
That's a more modern shot of the LaQuinta Hotel there.
Yeah.
That's right. Anyway, I think this is a good place. I think this is a good place for us to end off right now. Okay. So I just want to thank everybody for watching. Please subscribe to our channel, hit that like button, hit that subscribe and notification button. If you've got any questions or comments about what we've talked about, go down below. We check them, we answer them, Stu answers them, we read them. And if you want to support the channel, you can buy us a coffee. There's a link in the video description. And then finally, if you want to become a member of our channel, just hit that join button next to the subscribe button. Follow the instructions there. You can do that. And then if you want merchandise, Koala Calm, we've got people that want the Koala Calm. There's a link right down below where you can get your magnesium drink that help you. Go ahead, Janis.
Yeah, and also if you have any aches and pains, let's not forget the Oracle Healing Salve, which my daughter makes with CBD in it.
Yep. So anyway, that's our little business section of this. But I want to thank Stuart. Aloha in Hawaii. Mahalo, my friend. And we're going to have him back because we're going to carry on with these conversations. But we hope you enjoyed this video, everybody. Anybody got anything they want to say before we end off?
Have a good day. And if you're in California, be careful of all that smoke in the air.
Yeah, the fires. Yeah.
Yeah.
Stu, you okay? Anything else you want to say?
No, it's good. I'll probably say more in the next one about, you know, my relationship, and people are wondering like kind of what I'm doing, because I'm kind of pro Scientology and kind of pro you guys, and we could probably get into that stuff later. There's a lot to do with love and forgiveness going on.
That's right. And just also to remind our viewers, on September 25th, Wednesday, September 25th, 5 o'clock Eastern, 2 o'clock Pacific, we're going to do a live Q&A with Larry Wallersheim. So if you've got, put that on your calendar, because you'll be able to ask questions live on September 25th, Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. Go ahead, Jen.
And it's a one-time only deal that he's doing this. Yeah,
Yeah.
so don't think he'll come on again because he won't.
Yeah. Okay, everybody. Until next time, we'll see
Bye-bye.
you. Aloha.
Bye.